Hello and welcome to another part. Here we'll be working on automated testing for our application for the API, and we'll be testing our single and only for the moment the endpoint/users. There are many benefits for testing our application. First, as the name suggests, it will automate the testing, especially when you have multiple endpoints. Usually you will use some software like the Postman to manually test each endpoint and fill out the information, all right, for the request, the data, and clicking the send allow you to test single endpoint. By creating the automated testing, this will be done automatically, and with one script you will be testing the whole API, whether there's 2 or 20 endpoints, all will be tested in a single run of the script. Another useful benefit of testing is it allows you to detect any problem in your application, especially when you add new features or you modify your current code. By making sure that the test pass, it means that the code still works. If the test didn't pass, then you know that something is not working on your application. This is very useful for test-driven application, where you write your test first, then based on these tests, which of course at first it will not pass, you will get red warnings for each test. Now you start building your application to make this warning into green, so they pass. So in our case here, we're developing the application, then we're testing each feature we have developed. So it's not a test-driven application, because here the main goal is to learn. So that's why I prefer to put the test after we have developed the code, which is the more important part. Delivering the test done on time is more important than sitting and working on the test, especially in the beginning of the application where deadline is tight. So first step for testing, all right, we need to build a configuration file. All right, this configuration file will read the environment variables and will change them depending on the node environment. So if the node environment is development, all right, we'll have the database name Rideshare. But if the environment is test, we need to use another name, another database. So we create a database for testing. We'll name it rideshare.test. Why we are doing this? Because we don't want to override our development database where we are working on it, because on the test we'll be adding some documents and removing them after the test has been finished. So we need a clean database to test, to make our test efficient. All right. So now we have two variables for the database name. We need a configuration file to manage this, to switch between the test and development variables. So we create a config.js. All right. Inside the config.js, as we were doing in the index.js, this time it will be done in the config, where we are requiring the .env library and calling the config function on it. So here in our config.js, we require the .env and call the config variable. This config.js file need to export module.exports, which need to export the configuration file after it configures them based on the environment. So here, of course, by default, we can grab these variables and paste them here. So we need to export, of course, the usual variable available in the .env. All right, this is the basic. We haven't done anything yet. We're just exporting the environment variables. Now what we want to do is we want to add some conditions to check what environment we are in. So we'll check if we are in the test environment. So we'll check if process.inf node_inf, which will get us the environment as a string. So we'll check if it's test. All right. Then what we'll do, we'll change the database URL first. So here we create a variable, we'll name it dbName, which will be by default, of course, process.inf.mongodb URL. But in case if we are in the test environment, we'll change it to _test, to the test database name. All right. What else? For the port also, we'll change the port. So we also add a variable for port, which by default will be the default port. But in case we're in the test environment, we'll change the port to something else. So here we're using the port 3. We haven't set the port. Oh, it's here, the port. So we'll change the port to, let's say, 302. What about 302? It's good. All right. So this is it. With this configuration file now, we'll have the variable set up correctly in relation to the node environment. So now we need to import this config file. Instead of requiring .in, we'll create a constant, and we'll get the port, the db URL. We'll make sure the name, all right, db URL, and the db name, all right, which will be equal to require /config. All right. Here we forgot to assign the db name to the db name. In that case, since they have the same name, we can rely on the ES6 shortcut to type just db name. Then for the port, the same way. All right. This is it. All right, we're done here concerning the config. So we have the config set up. We remove these 3-line variables. Let me make sure it is port, not post. My mistake. So we remove this variable and we save. Now let's test to make sure that we haven't done any mistake or typo by going to our API folder, then npm run dev. All right, we have an error. Okay, so database name cannot contain the character / here the db name Rideshare _test. Concerning the db name, we are setting the mongodb URL instead of the db name. All right, db name test. All right, so we made a mistake and now it is fixed. All right, so let's go and test. So by trying to add this user, which is already in the database, so we expect to get a duplicate email, which means it is working. All right, so all is good. Let's keep working now on the testing. Now for the test, we'll be using two libraries, the SuperTest and Jest. Jest will give us a framework for our test, to run our test, and the SuperTest will allow us to make the test, make requests, and expect the results. So let's install with yarn add Jest and SuperTest. All right, so let's install first these two libraries. Here the installation is done, but I made a mistake. I didn't specify that I want them as a dev dependencies. So in my package.json, they are installed in the dependency. So to make them run only for the development as a development dependencies, I will add the dev dependency manually here, since I forgot to specify while installing them, and I will move them inside this object, so with the jest also. Alright, this way I'll have them in the dev dependencies. Alright, so here we have the library available for our application. Now in the index.js, of course, we will be needing the application, alright, where we have set some routers and we are connecting to the database. So we need this for our testing. We will export module.exports the app, alright, and in our test we'll import this object app, alright. So for the test we need a new folder, a test folder. So we'll create a folder, we'll name it test, and inside of the test we'll put the index.test.js. Now it will be a single file which will handle the testing for our single endpoint. Here first we require the app, which is in the index. Then we'll require the request from the SuperTest, which allow us to make requests, and we'll add a describe. Alright, we'll add a message here. It should add new user. Alright, the describe take another parameter, which will be the function that we will make the test inside of it in its body. So sorry, here the message should be something, a description of the suite of tests that we will be creating inside this function. So the message will be testing users. Alright, that's it. Now here we can create as many tests as we need inside this suites of tests. So with the it function, so it takes the first parameter, a description. It should add new user. Again, similar to describe, it take another function. Right, inside this function now we'll make our test. Here we will be using the app to make requests, and here we get the done function where we can call it once the test is done to signify for Jest that the test is done. Alright, and this will be an async function because we'll be making a request. So here we'll be using the request function. So await request, we'll give it the app, we'll use the .post here. The post will be to the /users endpoint, and we'll send with it the object. We can copy this object here from our Postman. Alright, and we can save this the result of this operation inside a constant named res. Once this operation is finished, we'll create the test. We'll check some expectation. First we'll expect the res.status to be 201, which means the object has been saved. Now it's 201 for the creation, and we'll make sure in our index.js we are sending 201. So here we're sending by default it is 200, so we can set the status to 201 to signify that we are creating a new resource, that this endpoint here is does create a new resource. So now we expect to have a 201, and basically this is it. With 201 it means it is working. And finally we'll call the done to signify that this test here is done. Alright, so now we have the file that we can test. Now to be able to test this file, now in our package.json we'll create a new script which we'll name it test. Oh, we already have a script test. Now here for the test script we run the jest, and in our console we'll type npm run test. Alright, here is our jest running, but we have the test failed, and here we are getting some warning, jest did not exit 1 second after the test run has completed. This usually means that there are asynchronous operations that weren't stopped in your test. Consider running test with detect open handles to troubleshoot this issue. Here I know in advance what is happening, and this is a common mistake when working with test in Node.js. So here in our index we are doing many things at the same time. Alright, we have the connection to the database which is asynchronous. Then we have the port here that is running. It will keep running even after the test has finished. So and plus here in our test the request will already create a connection, so we don't need here to create a connection for the test. And for the database connection, alright, we need to make sure that the database is connected before running any test. So we need to do some refactoring here for our index.js before proceeding to the test. Alright, so first let's refactor the database connection. So we'll create here a new file, we'll name it connection.js, and inside of it we get the Mongo client. Then from the config we get the information related to the database, the DB URL and the DB name. So we can remove these two. Then here we are creating the client, so we need that too. Now here for this function we need to make it an async function, alright, that returns the DB. So I will remove now the variable DB, and I will move this function and remove here the run connect. Alright, I'll paste it here, and it needs to return a promise. Here it needs to return new promise. Now the promise require as a parameter a callback function. Now the function will get the resolve and object functions. Now this need to be async because the connection is an async connection. As you can see, we need to use the await, and inside of this function we'll put the try catch. Alright, now once we successfully connect, we'll resolve with the DB. Alright, so this will be a constant DB, and This way, once we call this function, we'll get the DB if it is successful, and if there's an error, we'll reject with the error. Finally, we'll export default the let's name it connect here, the connect, all right, function. All right, so we'll export the connect here. We have now the connection in its own file. Now we can, or in its own module to be more precise. Now we can import the connection here. So we'll create a constant connect, which will be equal to require connection. All right, now for the connect, we can call it like this, connect, which will connect. All right, so let's give our API a test. All right, we have an error, unexpected token. Oh, all right, I made an error here in its module dot exports, which will be equal to connect. All right, port is not defined, all right, because we have removed the world config. So now, all right, so now it seems it is working. We can test that in the Postman. So if I click send with the same user email, I'll expect to get duplicate email. DB is not defined. All right, I made here also a mistake. I need to get the DB where I'm using it here in the collection. So what I will do, I can create here .then, which I'll get the DB, and let's remove here the /route, which we don't need it, and I need to copy all of this inside the DB callback, inside the connect callback. So I'll move all of these routing inside the DB. So if we test again, all right, we got it working. Next, we need to create a separate module that will create and set up the app variable without running the server. So we'll have an app with the router, which we'll import in this file, and this file with the connection and the app required will set up the server and the database connection. So let's also create now a new file. All right, now let's create a new module, which will be app.js, which will handle the creation and setting up of the app. Now from the index, we'll need the express variable, the cores, the validation error, then we'll need this 3 line where we are creating and setting up some middleware for the app. Then of course we'll need the function, the constant that handle new users. We also need the two function is email and is password. The same for the validate user. And the route for the slash users. We also need that. Alright, so what will happen here is, as we were doing before, we are creating the app, we are setting the cores as a middleware for the app, and express.json also as a middleware which will run on each request to parse body of the request as JSON and the body of the response as JSON. The core will allow any third-party application that is trying to connect to our API from the browser. We'll give it the permission. Later on, we'll add some restriction to allow only our application to connect. Then we'll have the handle new user, which will return a promise, and will add in the database a new user. If success, it will return the ID, else an error. Two functions here that we are using in the validation, the is email and is password, which will check if the format of the email or the password are correct, which are used in the validate user functions that will validate the user object sent from the user with the request. And here finally we're setting a new router, the users that use the method post. Alright, and the handle function of this route will use, of course, the validation and the handle new user to create a new user in the database, and it will send a statue of 201 with the result in case of success. The result will be, of course, user ID. In case of error, we are handling each case. So if it's our custom validation error, it will send the appropriate message. If it's a duplicate email, which will be sent by the mongodb driver, also will handle this case. Finally, the general case will send the 500 error. All right, so this is it. Now we need to export the app module.exports app. All right, now in the index.js, we'll require the app. All right, now here, after we made sure that we successfully connected to the database, we'll display a message. Here in the connection, we'll remove these messages from here and use them here in the index.catch. And we'll get the error message also. We'll paste it here along with the received error in the catch. So now we connect to the server again. All right, let's test it in Postman. So if we send now a request with the body with an email that already exists in the database, we expect to see a duplicate email. DB is not defined. All right, we got DB is not defined, no problem. Why? Because the app require a DB here in the handle new user, which we are using here. So we need a way to receive the DB. So what we will do, we can require the DB here, and here for the router. All right, we'll wrap it in a function. So I'll grab this code here and I'll wrap it in a function. So the function will be create a constant. Let's name it set up routes. All right, and it will be a function that requires the DB. and this db that we receive here in the function will send it to the handle new user. Alright, this way it will work. Now we'll export the setup route. Now we need also the app. Now we have two choices. Either we'll return the app from the setup routes, or we will send an object that contains setup routes and the app, or we'll add to the app a function. Alright, so here we can, for the app, we can create a function like setup routes. Alright, we'll create the app.setUpRoutes, which will be equal to a function that receives the DB as a parameter, and inside that function we'll create the user's route, which have the DB. So this solution works. Now for the export, we'll export the app, which contains the setup routes that in the index.js we'll call it as a method on the app, and provide with the DB after we have successfully connected to the database. Alright, so this will work. Now if we run npm run dev, alright, and in my Postman, if I click send now, remember this email already exists in the database. Now if I send, I'll get a duplicate email, which means that it's working perfectly. Alright, now let's go to fix our test after we have made the proper refactoring. Alright, now for the test, let's get back to the index.js. Now we'll import the app from the src app, then we'll import the connection or connect from the src also connection. This way we have the app and the connect. Now before any test, so we'll call the function before all, which is provided to us by SuperTest, which will take a callback function. Now with the before all, we can try to connect, so we'll make it async. Here we'll await for the connect. Now the connect will return the database, the DB. So create a constant DB that will receive the result of the connect once it's done. And then we'll create the routes with app.setup routes, providing to it the database, the DB. Alright, so now let's try the test, and hopefully it should work anyway. Let's try it. So I can run npm run test. Alright, everything is working. We got one passed, but alright, we have just did not exit 1 second after. We still have this error here. So let's run the, as they suggest, the detect open handles. So if we go to our package.json and append to the jest this instruction and run npm test. Alright, now we got fail. If we go to the test index.test, alright, the email now is duplicate, so we need to change the email to 3 and run the test again. Alright, this time it is passed, but we have a problem here. The test didn't exit. It is still running, so something is still open, and the handle detect open handles did not provide any result for us to see what is opening. Alright, now we have here two issues. First, as you can see, every time I run the test, I need manually to change the. Let us check the database and see what we have now currently in the database. If we go to our local host and connect, we go to the database Rideshare test, and we see that it is using effectively the testing database that we have specified in our configuration, and we have the user, alright. So what we need to do is we need to clean the database before doing any test here in the before all. So to clean here the database, we need access to the collection, and to get access to the collection, we can do this with db.collection users dot with delete many without providing any parameter. It will delete the whole documents inside the users collection. So let's give it a test to see if it is working as expected. So npm run test. Alright, again npm run test. Alright, if we again refresh the database, we have only one user, the last one created. So this is all good, but we still have the second problem, which the test is not quitting after receiving the result for some reason. So what we can do here, let me remove this attribute and run the test again. Alright, now we get this, just something is still running after we finish the test. So here I think we need to close the database after we finish the test. We can do this in the after all. Here we can close the database, but we need the client actually that creates the connection, and if we check the connection.js, we need this client here. Alright, so to get this client also we need to export it. Here with the resolve we can export, alright, an object. Alright, so in our index then we'll get we need to retrieve the DB from the object like this by destructuring it. And now in our test we can retrieve both ZDB and the object. Alright, but we need to assign it to some global variable, so we create here a constant. We'll name it a client, and this client will assign it to. So here what we can do is create a client constant and a DB constant. Then we'll assign the result returned by the connect respectively to DB and client. Alright, we can write them in parentheses for it to work. And here we can make to client.close to close the connection after the test is done. Alright, one mistake I did, this need to be a var. Same for ZDB, it need to be var because we are changing it, so it can be a constant. Now this is an async operation, we can await for it, and here we can put async. So let's try our test another time. npm run test. Npm run test. Now it is working and it is quitting normally. So npm run test, All right, now everything is working. The test is installed and working properly. Again, we can test and verify our perfect. So this is it. This is for the testing. Thank you for watching and see you in the next section. In the next video, we'll be working on the front end to implement the user registration. So I'll see you soon.